those kind of everyday experiences recently that made me think, made me be a little self-reflective and think about how far I still have to come in this process of trying to kind of think better and be better. So, short story of it without getting into much of the details. I was at an event recently, kind of a get together with a bunch of people, and there was a person there who I didn't know that well, but I'd met a few times and we'd had some conversations. And at the get together we were at the event we were at, we spoke briefly, but then the person kind of went off somewhere else, and it was kind of one of those dynamics. And for any of you that spend too much time thinking about these things, right, overthinking these things, you'll understand where I was kind of talking to the person, and then something came up where they had to go somewhere else, and they never came back. And kind of for the rest of the event, I didn't really see that person, and we didn't really have any more conversations or connect at all beyond that. And you have to understand, for those of you that do, you'll understand. But as I always say, like, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So for me, as innocent, as benign as that sounds, that story I just told, that can be a really big deal. That can be something that ruminates in your head, as it has in mine to some extent, for days. Where in this case, I found myself saying, like, in the simplest form, like, why doesn't that person like me? I thought we got along. I thought that person liked me. Why did they leave and not come back? Why didn't they want to have a conversation with me? And on and on and on, kind of down that thread of trying to understand what's going on there. And what I find interesting about it is, A, that despite all the work I've done, all the thinking about thinking, all the trying to be more honest with myself, trying to improve myself, figure out all these little weird quirks and flaws of the mind, and try and be just super rational and logical, even with all that, this type of situation still comes up. So it just shows you, like, the strength of it, right? For somebody that is a people pleaser, and we all have our own different issues, whatever they might be. But as I say all the time, like, the gravitational pull of that is so strong that even this innocent situation, it couldn't help but, my mind couldn't help but go there and think, like, well, what's really going on here? And it just genuinely bothered me that it seemed like maybe this person didn't like me. So that was kind of the first interesting observation. The second interesting observation was the good stuff, right? Which is, at least at this point, I'm able to kind of step outside of it and look at it and recognize what I'm doing. And at least conceptually recognize, like, hey, this is a little bit crazy. Like, this could have been totally innocent. This, more or less could have meant nothing. Furthermore, even if the person didn't like me, even if it wasn't innocent, even if it was deliberate, and they're like, hey, I gotta get away from that guy. I don't want to have to talk to him. So what, right? Like, I can know that I thought about it. I didn't do anything to offend that person. I didn't do anything other than just be myself. And if that's something that didn't work out and not, doesn't really want to be around, well, that's okay, right? That's life. Not everybody likes everybody. Not everybody wants to spend time with everybody. So the ability to, although I can't stop it, because I do still find myself thinking about it a little bit, when I do find myself kind of thinking about it too much, ruminating too much, I can at least step outside of it and put that kind of logical, rational hat on and say, like, all right, let's not make too much of this. Let's kind of break from that pattern I'm in of thinking about it. And it doesn't, upset my day. It doesn't ruin me in any way. The last piece, though, which is where that second piece really comes in, is it's interesting to think or to see, because at times when I was thinking about this, I found my mind going to the place of, like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why didn't that person want to talk to me? I wonder if they don't like me. Like, I wonder if I did something to upset them. I wonder if there's something about me that they didn't like, or, maybe they saw one of these videos and they didn't like what I had to say. How quickly my mind turned that into, like, well, I don't like that person, right? How quickly my mind wanted to protect me, wanted to make me feel better. And instead of just ignoring it altogether and saying it's really not that big of a deal at all, instead of just saying, like, okay, maybe that person doesn't like me, and that's fine, right? No big deal. My mind had to go to the place of, that person's the problem. I don't like that person. I have a problem with that person. I don't want to see that person. I don't want to talk to that person anymore. How quickly we do that. And I think that's just so indicative of how our minds work and how so many of the problems in the world today, right? I talk about this stuff all the time, but it's obvious, like, the divisiveness, the us versus them, the kind of teams, the tribe, all that stuff, how easily our minds slide right into that groove. Because all it took was a simple, innocent thing where somebody had to walk away and was distracted and maybe didn't even think about it again and just got caught up with something. For me to go to a place of, I don't like that person. I have a problem with that person now because they upset me or hurt me in some way that they may not even know they did. And it just shows you how the mind works. And it shows you why that second point I say is so important. The ability to step outside, to break from the pattern, to break from the blueprint that our minds normally go in. And please believe me, like, nobody is more guilty of this than me as a recovering people pleaser. This is not an easy thing to do. I do not get it right all the time. But the constant effort and focus to try and do it, to try and identify when you're acting in that way, when you're falling into that groove or that pattern of catastrophizing or people pleasing or worrying too much about what somebody else thinks, or just letting your mind in whatever way it does kind of play off these flaws that we have where it thinks it's protecting us, but it ends up being net negative for us. It ends up being something that makes us feel worse. We spend way too much energy, thinking about it and ruminating on it. We now have a problem with that person. I now have animosity towards them. All these things that don't need to be there. And that's the importance of stepping outside of it. That's the importance of questioning our own minds. That's the importance of just not going along with the flow. And ultimately, I would say that's the importance of thinking about thinking in a very almost mathematical, logical way. Because when you start doing that, when you start being really logical, it's hard for your mind to take the easy outs it would normally take, right? It's easy in this simple story for my mind to get to a place of like, oh, that person's a jerk. You shouldn't like that person. It's easy because it's filling in a bunch of gaps that it doesn't know. It's making a bunch of assumptions and it's going right there because that feels better. But when you test those assumptions, when you don't allow those gaps to just be filled in and you say, no, let's actually look at it and see what actually makes sense here. It's almost as likely, if not more, that that person just got distracted and didn't come back. It's almost as likely, if not more, that maybe we aren't going to be best friends ever, but that doesn't mean they have a problem with me and I should have a problem with them. It's only when you start pulling that apart that you have a better chance of getting towards the truth. And I'll say this in closing, right? What a lot of people would say to me when I say stuff like this is, how do you have time all day to think about these things? And it's a fair point, but as I often say, it's picking your battles. It's identifying those things that are important enough that you feel like, yeah, I need to dig in on this a little bit. I need to really break it down and think about it. Those are really the important times to do it, and you have to figure out when those are. In a situation like this, right, where I find myself ruminating too much, maybe that's an important situation. Or maybe, as I did in this case, to me it's more representative. This particular instance isn't that big of a deal, but it's a pattern I know I have. It's something that I often fall into. So being able to step outside and observe it and see it and pick it apart and see what's happening, it's worth the time. It's worth the mental energy to do it. But that's a decision and a prioritization we all have to make.